And now we have our last speaker for today. We have a young man coming all the way from Denmark, Christian Trampedach. He is the founder of @restless.arch on Instagram. It is an Instagram magazine dedicated to showcase the very best of contemporary living for both renowned and lesser-known architects and photographers to ensure the great contemporary projects receive the deserved recognition and acknowledgement. In only the past 3 years, he has already 1.1 million followers on Instagram. So let us put our hands together for Mr. Christian Trampedach.
Thank you very much. So, I'm not an architect, not at all, but maybe in spirit, but not as a profession. But back in 2007, I was in 7th grade of elementary school. And in elementary school, I had this one teacher, and his name was Jack. Jack was a regular teacher, but there was one thing that he did differently. He understood the trends of innovation. So I had Jack for one course, and one course only, and that was called Innovation of Tomorrow. So in this course, basically, the first thing that we had to do was to download a program called Google SketchUp. Maybe you have heard about that before. I believe you have. And our first assignment was to create this beautiful, beautiful gable house. Very traditional. You can see it right there. So beautiful. And you can imagine, as a 13-year-old guy at that time, I felt super confident. This simply seemed way too easy. But what you have to remember is nothing that seems easy is usually easy. So I was keeping up, messing up with the hidden 3D geometry. And you can imagine what happens. Basically, your beautiful gable house starts to disappear. So the thing is, when something is very easy, it's simply not. And that's what I realized here. And that's very much what the social media world is today. Things are simply taken for granted. So we can all relate basically to social media. It's something that people, they use on a daily routine. It doesn't really matter if you are an architect, or you are an economist, or you're a biologist, or even a football player. But it's something that we can all relate to. But the thing is, if you use social media for other things than just, communication with your friends, if you use it professionally, you might actually have a greater chance to become the next Bjarke Ingels, or the next Zaha Hadid, or even the next Norman Foster. So social media is a very, very powerful tool today. So you might be wondering now, okay, who is this guy on stage? Well, let me tell you about it. So my name is Christian Trampedach. I'm 24 years old. I am from Copenhagen, Denmark, Scandinavia, Nordic countries. And basically my background is not within architecture, but I'm actually a business major. I studied international business and politics at Copenhagen Business School. And then I have created this beautiful thing right here, Restless Architecture, an Instagram blog, which has reached 1.1 million followers. On the way to 1.2, which is really, really nice. So basically, it all goes back to 2015, where I started to get a grasp of 3D design. I threw away this simple gable house that I created, and then I started to do something a bit more interesting, some concepts. But the thing is, I was not really an architect, but I was like, okay, I'll just see where things are going, and I want some feedback. So what I did was that I created a personal profile with my own name. So it was nothing fancy, anything. I just wanted to see if there was some feedback, if people, they liked my concepts. But what I found out is that growing an Instagram profile is not very easy. It's not. People, they think it's easy, but it really isn't. So what I did was that I reached out to another guy. His name is Rafael. He's from Brazil. And I wanted him to promote some of my projects. And throughout my communication with him, I suddenly realized that actually there is some hole in the market on Instagram. So that's what I wanted to basically dig into, and that was to provide transparent information about projects, to honor the ones behind the projects. And that's why I created Restless Architecture. So my motto is to honor and promote the greatest contemporary living in the world. So it's very much focused on modern buildings, modern homes, and they have to have some sort of restless identity over it. That's something that I can relate to, being restless. I feel like I can't really sit still. So I always want to be curious, learn more, and that's also what I'm trying with this page. People need to learn. So basically, some of the achievements, I have, of course, what you have heard, 1.1 million followers, maybe it doesn't say it's too much, but then 45 million likes, and on a yearly basis, 132 million views. So which is quite a lot, I would say. So what we've been witnessing the last 20 years is basically like a paradigm shift. We are facing like a digital age. We are already doing it. We are changing the way that we are communicating with the world. Right now, it is much more about real-time communication. Back in the days, when you had a project, an architectural project, then you would promote it through magazines and so on, physical magazines. So when you wanted to publish something, it could take quite a while to publish something. But today, it's so different because we have social media, we have the internet, it's so much more fluid, dynamic. And it gives us access to everyone. That is the key point. So, the million-dollar question, how do you get 1 million followers? Yeah, I've tried it, but now it's your turn. Actually, there are no architects in this world that have 1 million followers independently. So you can see it's going to be a tough challenge I'm giving to you now. But I mean, none of these architects have followed my guidelines. So you might have a chance. So why social media? I usually say it's about making the unknown known. Known to your family, known to your friends, known to your potential clients or customers, and known to your competition. And social media is also about branding. Branding of your architectural projects. Branding of your architectural accomplishments. One thing is to be great at mastermind, you might say, at architecture, but the other part is, which is much greater, to being able to communicate to people that you are great, that you are a mastermind. Because if no one knows, well, then no one knows. So another point with social media is this talent acquisition, and what is that? Well, we have talent pools all over the world, great architecture students. Social media is a vital tool to attract the best students to architecture practice. You might think that students, when they want to find a job, that they go to your website. They don't, I'm telling you. They go to your social media profiles, and if you don't have one, they're not going to find you. So, what is very important is to present yourself very professionally on social media, because that's where they will be looking at the first time. So if you want to attract them, that's the place to be. And then what I normally also say is that network is basically the strongest currency that we have in the world. So you can imagine if you have access to everyone in the world by your hand, by your phone, by your computer, that's an extreme power to have. So, what did I do? Is the big question. Well, first of all, I wanted to create a strategic identity. And this is something that you would have to do as well in terms of social media. Because you have to ask yourself the question, who am I? Or who are we as an architectural practice? Because that's what you need to communicate. to people. And there are a few things here to remember. The first thing is the central values of you as an architectural practice, or you as a single architect. Because you need to be able to basically explain everyone what is it that you stand for. Not what does everyone else stand for, but what do you stand for. And that needs to be translated into focusing on a target group. Who is it that you want to communicate to? Because I see so many architecture practices around the world that are focusing maybe on, you could say, developers and so on. They want to gain new clients with social media, which is great. But the issue is then they communicate to other architects. And then they don't reach out to the ones they actually want to reach out to. So it's very important to remember, okay, who is it that you want to talk to? And then talk to them. Understand how they communicate, how they react, how they behave. Because otherwise you won't succeed. The next thing is you have to set some goals and some objectives for your social media campaigns or just your social media growth. These needs to be, of course, measurable. Now I talk from a business perspective. But they also have to be ambitious, and you have to commit to them. Because with social media, I feel like that a lot of people, they say, oh, well, we use social media. We have an Instagram profile, we have a Facebook, we have a LinkedIn, and so on. But they don't really commit to tracking their performance. And if you don't do that, then you won't really push yourself the extra mile, which will create the powerful influence that you all deserve. And then the very, very important part is to develop a plan. Like that's alpha omega. If you don't have a plan, then you can just quit already. So what I did basically was to state down some central keys that I wanted to address. One of those keys were content direction. It is so, so important. If you have been to social media, if you have been to Instagram, you see so much content that is not really, interesting. You have to remember that when you're posting something and it appears in someone's feed and they look at the post, you have to remember that you have basically a millisecond to attract them. Otherwise, they will just keep scrolling. So you need to be very, very conscious about what is it that you post? How is it that you frame it? A good example is this guy, Alex Nerovnia, which is a Russian architect. Last year, he had around 5,000 followers on Instagram. Today, he has 115,000 in just a year. And that's an architect. He's just, basically doing some conceptual work of his thoughts, sharing them. Some might say, oh, well, I don't really like his ideas and so on, but that doesn't really matter. It's not really what is the architectural content here. It's much more about the approach that he has been doing. So when you look at his profile, for example, you see it's very easy recognizable. He's stating his name. It seems like it's very, common sense, but it actually isn't when you analyze what is going on Instagram. The next thing that he's doing is to have a clear theme. All his architectural shots are, it's visualizations, it's just 3D. But what he's doing is that he is having like a constant angle on the photos or the 3D visuals. And the consistency that you have on this page just creates it so much easier for people to follow. Because when people, for example myself, as an architectural influencer, are directing a lot of traffic to someone's page, that could be you as an architect, for example. If they enter the page and there is an inconsistency on this page, they will just walk away. They're not going to follow you. I've had so many arguments with, and it's not a criticism of architects at all, but I've had a lot of discussions with architects that felt like, oh, we didn't feel like we got so many followers out of this. Then I've had architects saying the opposite as well. But then I had to explain them, well, when you look at your photos, you basically crop them so that they don't see the essential elements of the photo. What you have to remember is the ABC of photography, basically. So if you look at this photo, for an example, there's a clear idea. They want to show the depth, you know. It's a terrace, it's well lit. You can see basically like the magnitude of the ceiling, the roof. It's so clearly defined, there is kind of like a direction in the photo which makes people want to learn more, you know. They might go and actually read what you have written in the caption. If you, on the other hand, if you're posting a photo that is taking away the exposure might be off, there might be too much going on a photo, it draws people attention away. They're not really interested. And then it doesn't really matter if it's a great architecture project. If you could make the most amazing project and you would be so proud of it. But if you don't communicate it well, then it doesn't really matter because they're not going to find it. But if you do communicate it well, then you will experience something much more amazing. You will experience that people will actually want to share it, and that's when the snowball starts to roll. So what you also have to remember is always use some sort of call to action when you post something on Instagram. It is so important to make people engaged in your content. It might sound like, oh, what does one comment mean? Well, it can mean everything, and I'll explain you later why. But it's so also just, you know, from a social perspective that someone feels drawn towards your page. If people, they leave one comment, they might leave another. They might feel much more attached to your brand as an architect, your projects. They might even speak to others about it. And then the third thing, which is maybe one of the most important things, which I also touched upon before, is to understand your audience. Like, who is it really that you're talking to? Who is it that you want to talk to? Who is it that you want to address? Because if you use words that audience, they don't understand, then they're not going to feel drawn towards your page. And I've experienced this so many times. I think, you know, architects, when they write texts and so on, I'm very amazed how eloquent their language is, how eloquent your language is. But you have to remember, if you want a private client, they might be speaking the same language as you. They might be speaking English as I do right here, but they might not be using the same words. So if you want to attach them, then you need to basically talk to them. The next thing is engagement. I don't know if you've heard about it before. Maybe you have. But engagement is basically defined as, you know, we have an engagement rate, which is basically the biggest measure on Instagram, which is the relationship between how much engagement you get, likes and comments, versus how many followers you have. If you have a high engagement rate, of course, then you have really good engagement. That's very, very important. And in fact, there are also some benchmarks that you can basically take and compare your own social media presence with. Because social media is all about engagement. It's all about commitment. It's all about letting people know what is it that you actually do. So you can imagine, if you have a low engagement, then less people will see it. And what you want is obviously to have a lot of people to see it. So, of course, you can have, you know, architectural influencers to promote you and so on, but the real power is where you find that you can actually independently build up your own presence and create your own engagement. You might think that an architecture firm, or social media, is it really something that can make a difference? Well, even, you know, architectural photographers I've been talking to, they have stated that they have got so much work from social media because so many architecture firms, maybe yourself, you have been getting inspired by a project on Instagram. Then you can imagine that so many other people, they have done the same thing. And why is it that if you get inspired by someone, Why is it that someone else would not get inspired and then be contacting you if they felt like, oh, well, this project that you made, it's amazing. We want that too. And then you give it to them. So there are some few tendencies on Instagram. It's just some quick information. If you use hashtags, maybe you have heard about it, I'll also explain it in a bit. It's very important, first of all, to use because it creates, on average, 12.6% extra engagement. That's what you want. So use the hashtags. You can use 30, just so you know. But video posts are becoming much more integrated part of Instagram. We have, Instagram TV, which is where you can create much stronger, longer videos, more in depth, where you'll be able to share basically like the whole process of your architectural project. I would bet that so many architecture students would love to see that. You can do interviews. You can do basically anything. Just a small behind the scenes can do everything in the world. It's so, so important. And then always try to make network. Use tags, tag each other. For an example, if you make a strategic alliance with another architectural firm, maybe it's someone that you work with on a regular basis. Try to help each other by promoting each other. It doesn't really have to be that, you have to show their whole project and so on, but just mention each other because it will benefit you in the end. I know in architecture there's very high competition, but sometimes you also need a little bit of collaboration to basically make the world better for both of you, making your success stronger. So basically, there is one thing at Instagram that you should never ever do, or for social media in general. It's the curse. It is really the curse. And what is that? That's fake engagement. Fake followers. Bots. It's just, nasty buzzwords that I'm just throwing out here. I really, I hate it. Because the thing is, it's not going to make any difference for you. In fact, it might actually do the reverse. It does more harm than good. It might be like, then you can show off to your competitors, I got 1,000 likes on my Instagram photo and so on. But I mean, it doesn't create more than that. The thing is, you get flagged, first of all. Then no one, it's quite easy, first of all, to analyze your way to find out that, well, this person is not really trustworthy. And that's just a curse. So never, ever, ever try to buy followers or engagement. But I'm kind of a pragmatic person, and today I felt like that you need to have some sort of practical tool, or I would probably call it a framework. It's a framework that I have built basically my Instagram success on, so this is really, really important. It's called the hashtag pyramid. And if you look up on Google to find the 10 best advices for Instagram or social media, you will never find this one because it's not there. But what this model essentially is, it has 4 levels. The higher levels are high popular hashtags. So that's a bit more generic, something that people, they might be using in their everyday, daily basis. Food, for example, that's a very popular hashtag. The thing is, very popular hashtags, they create the best exposure. But it comes with a price. It's very, very difficult to reach the most popular there, so you get the benefit of it. What this model essentially does is to base your engagement on low popularity hashtags, so you can build up engagement and then reach the higher levels. If you are very confused about this, well, don't worry. I have a small example. You can look at these hashtags. There is architecture, which is a very, very popular hashtag with 180 million times that it has been used. Then there is it's unpopular, you could say, or very less popular, garden design ideas, which only has around 6,000 posts. So you can ask yourself, which one do you think has the most competition? Obviously, that's architecture. That's the one most people they use. What does that mean? Well, okay, if you use architecture, where there's 108 million posts, that's probably also where all the architecture students, they try to find inspiration. They search for the architecture. But the thing is, with 108 million posts, do you ever think that anyone is going to find your post? Probably not. That's why you need to basically base the fundament for your engagement on lower, like less popular hashtags, because if you get engagement from the lower hashtags, then you can start to like build your way up, and then suddenly you might actually have enough engagement to being able to use architecture as a hashtag. This has worked extremely well for me. In the beginning, I was just like everyone else. I was doing the same mistakes as everyone else. So I was using architecture or design, you know. These are very, very strong buzzwords. But the thing is, no one will ever see it when you're small. I'm using architecture now on my profile because, well, now it's big. I'll be, basically, when I post something and I use architecture, it will be up there in the top. But the thing is, an architecture practice with, let's say, 500 followers or 200 followers, you will never have a chance if you don't have a lot of engagement. And the engagement you will not get by using just the big ones. You have to use a combination, which is mostly the lower popular hashtags. So basically, if you follow these 3 elements of creating a strategic identity, people need to know who you are, you need to be able to communicate it well, you need to know who you are yourself as an architectural practice. If you use content creation, content direction, to specify what is it exactly that we want on our page. If you're using engagement in the right way, the one I just explained you, you might be able to make a great gable house, but the most important thing, you might have a greater chance of becoming the next star architect. Thank you very much.